For a considerable period, officers Daniel Briggs and Mark Keller engaged in the illicit use of their authority. Each fabricated report was systematically concealed, every grievance was expunged, and every display of force was readily condoned. They harbored a profound conviction that they were beyond reproach and that their authority was unfettered, a belief that persisted until their encounter with an exceptional woman. This individual was a legally blind, African-American judge, who frequented a tranquil residential area with her assistance animal. To their perception, she appeared defenseless, an easy target for dismissal. They anticipated that her complaint would similarly evaporate, vanishing like all prior ones. Little did they perceive the presence of a federal magistrate concealed behind her dark spectacles. This was a woman equipped not with weaponry, but with the formidable tools of jurisprudence, unwavering resolve, and a network of influential contacts. When their hubris impelled them to inflict harm upon her devoted canine companion, they inadvertently ignited a conflagration that would prove beyond their capacity to control, a blaze that would ultimately consume them from within. Before we proceed, kindly indicate your geographical location in the comment section and be sure to subscribe, as the narrative we will unveil tomorrow is one you absolutely will not want to miss. The nascent morning light gently bathed the upper branches of the trees in Oakage Estates, projecting elongated shadows across the immaculately maintained pedestrian walkways. Judge Mariah Ellison navigated her customary route with careful steps, her left hand lightly guiding the harness of justice. The German shepherd moved with a palpable sense of purpose, his gait perfectly synchronized with hers, a testament to years of unwavering partnership. "A pleasant morning to you, Mrs. Chen," Mariah called out, her acute hearing instantly discerning the distinctive rhythm of her neighbor's garden shears meticulously trimming rose bushes. "Judge Ellison, it is indeed a beautiful morning, is it not?" "Mrs. Chen responded, her voice imbued with genuine warmth. "Justice is as resplendent as ever." Mariah offered a smile, her free hand gently stroking Justice's flank. His fur felt pleasantly warm beneath the early sun. He's well aware of it, too. He practically swells with pride when people offer him compliments. His tail maintained a steady, rhythmic wag as they continued their perambulation. The air in the neighborhood was fragrant with the aroma of freshly cut grass and blooming jasmine. Mariah had committed to memory every discernible fissure in the pavement, every driveway entrance, and every fire hydrant along their familiar path. Her visual impairment had never impeded her capacity to meticulously map her environment with remarkable precision. 3 steps to the miller's driveway, she murmured to herself, a habitual practice from the initial period following her loss of sight 15 years prior. Now, it had become second nature, yet these quiet internal affirmations provided her with a sense of solace. Justice halted at the intersection, patiently awaiting her directive to proceed. Mariah listened intently for the sound of approaching vehicles before giving a subtle nod forward. They had traversed approximately half of Maple Street when she perceived a faint tensing in Justice beneath her hand. The dog's pace decelerated, a discernible signal indicating an approaching presence. Even before the acrid scent of tobacco smoke reached her, Mariah recognized the heavy, distinctive tread of footsteps. Harold Whitaker. The mere thought caused her shoulders to stiffen involuntarily. "Good morning," she said politely, though her prior experiences had taught her that any expectation of a reciprocal greeting was entirely unfounded. Harold emitted a sound, a peculiar intermingling of a grunt and a snort. "Yeah." Justice maintained an impeccable posture beside her, entirely disregarding Harold's presence as they passed. Mariah held her head high, her posture conveying an air of unshakable dignity. 15 years presiding over the federal bench had instilled in her the invaluable lesson of wielding dignity as an impenetrable shield. From behind them, Harold's voice, deliberately modulated to a hushed undertone, carried through the air. "Doesn't belong here. Bringing down the property values." These words were undeniably intended for her ears. Mariah continued her walk, her facial expression remaining composed even as a surge of anger ignited within her chest. Justice, sensing her heightened tension, pressed closer to her leg, offering a small measure of comfort. They had nearly reached the conclusion of the block when a squirrel suddenly darted across their path. Justice emitted a single, sharp bark and tugged slightly at his harness, the first deviation from his otherwise flawless conduct that morning. "Easy, Justice," Mariah stated calmly, gently stroking his head. "Leave it." The dog immediately resumed his proper position, the momentary distraction swiftly forgotten. Mariah smiled, feeling a surge of pride at his prompt obedience. She reached into her pocket for a small treat, rewarding his exemplary behavior. From behind them, Harold Whitaker observed the scene with narrowed, hostile eyes. His features contorted into an expression of profound ugliness as he withdrew his mobile phone. This was precisely the pretext he had been anxiously awaiting. Any excuse, any minor infraction would suffice. His thumb jabbed repeatedly at the screen as he initiated a call to 911. Emergency services, came the immediate response from the operator. Harold's tone instantly transformed, becoming laced with a manufactured sense of alarm. Yes, I need to report a dangerous situation. There's a black woman who appears to be incapable of controlling her aggressive dog. It's lunging erratically. It nearly attacked me. He then turned away from the street, lowering his voice conspiratorially. She's blind. She can't possibly comprehend the extent of that animal's actions. There are children in this neighborhood. They are not safe with that beast in their vicinity. The operator inquired about his location, which he provided with alacrity, adding, "Please hurry before someone gets hurt. The dog is a German Shepherd. A large one. She's heading east on Maple Street towards the park." After concluding the call, Harold watched Mariah's receding figure with a palpable sense of bitter satisfaction. His lips curled into a thin, self-congratulatory smile. She walked with such an air of assurance, as if she were truly entitled to reside in this neighborhood, his neighborhood. The dog was merely a convenient justification. What truly irked him was her very presence, her evident success, and her resolute refusal to be intimidated by him. "We shall soon see how proud you are now," he muttered, returning his phone to his pocket. Across town, at the Central Police Station, the dispatch radio crackled to life. "Unit 47, we have a report of an aggressive dog threatening neighborhood children in Oakage Estates. Maple Street, vicinity of Parkview Lane." Officer Daniel Briggs, without hesitation, reached for the radio. Unit 47 responding. "Please provide details on the dog." "German Shepherd. Handler reported as a blind black female, proceeding towards the park area." Briggs glanced over at his partner, Officer Mark Keller, who was in the process of concluding his coffee. "Got a dog call. Guess we are on animal control duty today." Keller tossed his empty cup into the waste receptacle. "Better than writing parking tickets. What's the situation?" "Some shepherd gone wild. Owner reportedly can't control it." Briggs stood, adjusting the equipment on his belt. "Apparently, she's blind. That's a recipe for disaster, right there." Keller smirked, adjusting his cap. A blind person with an aggressive dog. What could possibly go wrong? His tone was heavily laden with sarcasm. "Let's move it before some kid gets their face mauled off." They proceeded towards the patrol vehicle, Briggs sliding into the driver's seat. "You understand the protocol concerning dangerous animals," he stated, his voice abruptly becoming serious. Keller nodded, his expression hardening considerably. "If that dog makes even one misplaced movement." "Precisely." Briggs started the engine, activating the siren as they departed the station. Better safe than resorting to apologies later. As they navigated through the city, Keller accessed a map of the neighborhood on his mobile device. Oakage Estates. Affluent area. Probably some wealthy individual who acquired a guard dog she's incapable of managing. "It doesn't matter how affluent she is," Briggs interjected, his knuckles tightening visibly on the steering wheel. "The law is the law. If the dog poses a threat to someone, we will take the necessary action." The patrol car accelerated through the morning traffic, its siren wailing incessantly. Within the confines of the vehicle, both officers had already conjured a mental image of what they anticipated encountering. This mental portrayal was heavily influenced by Harold's deliberately exaggerated report, by their own inherent biases, and by a system that had ingrained in them a tendency to perceive threats before individuals. 5 minutes out, Briggs announced, pressing the accelerator with increased force. Keller nodded, his gaze fixed on the windows of the increasingly upscale residences as they entered Oakage Estates. "Let's get this over with." The morning sun glinted off their polished badges as they raced towards Maple Street, towards Justice and Mariah, towards a confrontation meticulously constructed upon a foundation of falsehoods and prejudice. A confrontation that neither the judge nor her loyal companion had the slightest inkling was imminent. The police cruiser abruptly screeched to a halt at the curb, its tires kicking up loose gravel. Officer Briggs extinguished the siren but left the overhead lights activated, casting an alternating pattern of blue and red illumination across the serene street. Both officers disembarked from the vehicle with practiced haste, their doors slamming shut in near-perfect synchrony. Mariah stood on the sidewalk adjacent to the entrance of the modest neighborhood park, one hand firmly grasping Justice's harness. The German Shepherd remained seated impeccably at her side, alert yet composed. They had momentarily paused to savor the gentle morning breeze, which carried the refreshing sense of freshly cut grass and blossoming dogwoods. "Something is occurring," Mariah stated quietly, her head tilting slightly as she registered the sounds of car doors closing and the rapid approach of heavy footsteps. Justice's ears swiveled forward, but he remained seated, his training dictating that he should not react without a discernible cause. Briggs advanced, his hand already resting on the butt of his service weapon, his posture wide and overtly aggressive. Keller flanked him slightly to his right, mirroring his partner's palpable tension. Neither officer paused for even a fleeting moment to assess the situation unfolding before them. A calm woman and her impeccably behaved service dog stood quietly on a public thoroughfare. "Step away from the dog, Briggs commanded, his voice unnecessarily amplified for the tranquil morning atmosphere. Almost simultaneously, Keller bellowed, "Control your animal. Keep it restrained." Mariah's expression shifted to one of bewilderment in response to the contradictory directives. "Officers," she began, her voice steady and dignified despite her evident surprise. "I am blind, and this is Justice, my certified service dog. He is entirely under my control." She kept her free hand slightly elevated, making no sudden or threatening movements. Years of extensive courtroom experience had equipped her with the invaluable skill of maintaining composure even in the most trying circumstances. Internally, however, her heart was pounding with an alarming intensity. Doors began to open along the street as concerned neighbors emerged to ascertain the cause of the commotion. Mrs. Chen cautiously stepped off a porch, her garden shears still clutched in her hand. The Miller family paused their preparations for a day trip, their children observing the unfolding events with wide, curious eyes. "I require you to step away from the dog immediately," Briggs reiterated, his voice escalating in volume. "I cannot do that, officer," Mariah explained calmly. "He is my service animal. I depend on him for navigation. We have committed no transgression whatsoever." Justice, sensing the palpable increase in tension, shifted his position, moving slightly in front of Mariah in a protective posture. The dog remained silent, his stance alert but decidedly not aggressive. His rigorous training had prepared him for stressful encounters, emphasizing the importance of remaining calm and prioritizing his handler's safety. "The dog is moving. Control your animal," Keller shouted, his hand now fully resting on the grip of his firearm. Mariah felt the subtle alteration in Justice's stance through the harness. "He is merely performing his duty, protecting me. He is not exhibiting aggression." From the sidewalk across the street, Harold Whitaker materialized, approaching with a discernible smirk spreading across his face. He halted at a safe distance, his arms crossed demonstratively over his chest. "See," Harold declared loudly enough for all present to hear. "I informed you she has no command over it. That dog has been a source of trouble for months." Mariah's head turned sharply toward Harold's voice, her expression hardening with immediate recognition. "That is patently untrue. Justice has never caused any disturbance." "Sir, I must ask you to step back," Keller directed towards Harold, without diverting his gaze from Mariah and Justice. He then lowered his voice, addressing Briggs. "This precisely matches the description provided in the call." The assembled crowd of neighbors grew noticeably larger. Someone in the vicinity murmured, "What exactly are they doing?" Briggs took another step forward, his hand now firmly gripping the holster of his weapon. "Final warning, ma'am. Either control your dog or distance yourself from it." "Officer, I implore you," Mariah stated, struggling to maintain an even tone. "I am Mariah Ellison. There has been a grave misunderstanding. Justice is a highly trained service animal. He poses no danger." Justice maintained his protective stance, but the palpable tension permeating the atmosphere caused him to emit a soft, low growl. Not a lunge, not a bark, but merely a subtle warning sound emanating from deep within his throat. "The dog is aggressive," Keller exclaimed, drawing his weapon and holding it at his side. Mariah heard the distinct metallic sound of a firearm being unholstered. A wave of fear washed over her. "No, he is merely reacting to the hostile tone of your voices. Please lower your voices, and he will relax." She reached down to place her hand gently on Justice's back, attempting to offer him reassurance. "Easy, Justice. It's quite all right. Harold's voice pierced through the air once more, dripping with feigned concern. Officers, there are children present. That dog lunged at children earlier. That is an outright falsehood, Mrs. Chen called out from her yard, her voice ringing with conviction. That dog has never harmed anyone. Briggs's face flushed a deep crimson. The conflicting statements from various individuals, the pressure exerted by the burgeoning crowd, and his own surging adrenaline converged to create a perfect storm of critical misjudgment. Bring that dog under control this instant. Justice turned his head towards Briggs, continuing to emit a soft growl, resolutely holding his ground directly in front of Mariah. He is under control, Mariah insisted, her composure finally beginning to fracture. If you would simply, gun. Keller suddenly bellowed, despite the fact that nothing in Mariah's hands or pockets bore any resemblance to a weapon. This false alarm served as the final catalyst, pushing Briggs beyond his breaking point. In a single, fluid motion, he drew his firearm and aimed it. No! Mariah cried out, instinctively sensing the catastrophic turn of events through the sudden movements and audible gasps emanating from the observing crowd. The gunshot reverberated through the morning air with the force of thunder. Justice made no sound as the projectile struck him. His body spasmed violently, then collapsed heavily onto the sidewalk directly in front of Mariah, blood pooling rapidly beneath him. Mariah felt the harness go suddenly slack in her hand, felt Justice's considerable weight thud onto the ground. For one agonizing second, she was unable to process the horrific reality of what had transpired. Then, Justice emitted a single, soft whimper. Justice! Her voice broke as she dropped to her knees, her hands frantically searching for her beloved companion. The moment her fingers brushed against warm, wet fur, a primal sound of anguish escaped her throat. No, no, no. What have you done? The surrounding neighbors erupted into a cacophony of screams and shouts. Mrs. Chen dropped her garden shears with a sharp clatter. A child began to cry uncontrollably. He was protecting me. Mariah cradled Justice's head, feeling his labored breaths against her hands. He was just doing his job. Briggs stood frozen, his weapon still extended, as the chilling reality of his actions began to dawn upon him. Keller stepped forward, not to offer assistance, but to assert control over the escalating chaos. Everyone remain back, Keller commanded, his voice projecting across the gathering crowd. Harold Whitaker's smirk had completely vanished, replaced by an expression of profound shock. Even he had not anticipated such a devastating outcome. He began to retreat, attempting to blend back into the surroundings before anyone could connect him to the events that had just transpired. Justice's breathing grew increasingly shallow and ragged beneath Mariah's trembling hands. Blood soaked through her clothing as she knelt over him, tears streaming freely down her face. Stay with me, she whispered to him, her entire world imploding around her. Please, stay with me. The morning sun continued to shine with unwavering brilliance, utterly indifferent to the tragedy unfolding beneath its benevolent gaze. Birds chirped merrily in the trees lining the park. A gentle breeze wafted the scent of blood across the once tranquil street, and in the profound silence that followed the gunshot, before the renewed eruption of voices, the only discernible sound was the soft, weakening heartbeat of a loyal companion who had committed no offense other than existing in a world where certain lives were accorded less value than others. Mariah remained kneeling on the unforgiving pavement, her hands pressed firmly against Justice's fur. His chest no longer rose and fell. The warm blood that had coursed through his veins now stained the concrete beneath them, marking her hands and clothing with its crimson hue. Though her body quivered uncontrollably, her facial expression remained a carefully constructed mask of dignity, even as her world utterly crumbled around her. Justice, she whispered one final time, her fingers gently caressing his soft fur. The profound bond they had shared for 7 years, forged through countless courthouse corridors, peaceful morning strolls, and quiet evenings at home, was irrevocably severed in an instant by a single bullet. Neighbors surged forward, their faces contorted with a mixture of horror and palpable outrage. Mrs. Chen reached Mariah first, kneeling beside her despite the disturbing presence of blood. This is utterly wrong, Mrs. Chen declared, her voice thick with emotion. He did absolutely nothing wrong. Tom Rivera, a retired Army veteran residing 3 houses down, positioned himself directly between the officers and Mariah. What in God's name did you just do? He demanded, his fists clenched at his sides. That was a service animal. Others joined him, forming a protective semicircle around Mariah and Justice. Their voices rose in a unified chorus of anger and disbelief. I witnessed the entire thing. That dog exhibited no aggression. She explicitly informed you that she is blind. Someone call 911. We are 911. What exactly are we supposed to do? Officer Keller stepped forward, his hands still hovering near his weapon. The collective anger of the crowd seemed to deflect off him, replaced by a cold, chilling satisfaction that subtly upturned the corners of his mouth. Everyone needs to step back, he commanded, his voice devoid of any discernible trace of remorse. His gaze, fixed intently on Mariah, who remained kneeling beside Justice, was unflinching. You should have had that mutt under control. The crowd collectively gasped. Several individuals promptly produced their mobile phones, commencing the recording of Keller's callous pronouncements and Briggs's still visibly shocked countenance. At that precise moment, something fundamental shifted within Mariah. The initial shock receded, giving way to a familiar and potent clarity, the very same clarity she experienced on the bench when the scales of justice hung precariously in the balance. She gently laid Justice's head down and slowly rose to her feet, her movements deliberate and meticulously controlled. Blood dripped from her fingertips, staining the front of her light blue walking attire. Although she could not visually perceive the officers, she turned towards them with unerring precision, orienting herself by the sound of Keller's voice. She stood remarkably tall, her back perfectly straight, her unseeing eyes somehow finding Keller's face. Do you have any idea who I am? Her voice, sharp and commanding, cut through the quiet morning air. The assembled crowd fell into an immediate and profound silence, captivated by her every utterance. I am Judge Mariah Ellison, a federal court justice. The crowd gasped once more, this time a collective murmur of recognition rippling through them. Someone whispered, the civil rights judge. The color drained from Briggs's face as the full implications of the situation struck him with the force of a physical blow. His firearm, still held in his hand, suddenly felt impossibly heavy. With trembling fingers, he holstered it. Federal, he repeated, the word barely audible. Keller's smug smirk vanished instantly. His eyes darted nervously between Mariah, the assembled crowd holding their recording devices, and his partner. There appears to be a significant misunderstanding, Keller began, his tone dramatically altered, now bordering on deferential. We responded to a call concerning an aggressive dog that was threatening. Save it, Mariah interjected, her voice possessing a sharpness that caused him to flinch visibly. Officer Briggs just discharged his weapon, fatally wounding a clearly marked service animal belonging to a blind individual. An animal that was not actively attacking anyone. I heard no warning whatsoever. I detected no attempt at de-escalation. She took a deliberate step forward, and despite her blindness, both officers instinctively took a step backward. Badge numbers, names, precinct, immediately. Each word she uttered fell like a pronouncement from the bench. Briggs managed to find his voice, though it cracked with undeniable stress. Officer Daniel Briggs, badge number 4487, East Precinct. Officer Mark Keller, badge number 5122, East Precinct, he added, his voice less shaky but entirely devoid of its earlier arrogance. You must comprehend. The initial call reported. As what? Mrs. Chen interrupted, stepping forward. I reside directly next door. She pointed emphatically towards her residence. That dog has passed my home every single morning for years. It has never once caused any trouble. Tom Rivera nodded in agreement. Service dog vest. It was clearly visible. You did not even explore alternative courses of action. Keller's expression hardened as he surveyed the increasingly hostile crowd. He leaned closer to Briggs. Radio for backup now. As Briggs fumbled to locate his radio, Mariah knelt once more beside Justice, her carefully maintained composure finally succumbing to the overwhelming grief. She gathered his still warm body into her arms as best she could, his weight feeling immense against her chest. Blood soaked through her shirt, but she was oblivious to it. 7 years, she said, her voice carrying clearly to everyone present. Justice has served as my eyes for 7 years. He never harmed a soul. From the rear of the crowd, Harold Whitaker observed the unfolding scene with mounting unease. This was not the outcome he had envisioned. A few stern words from the authorities, perhaps a minor citation, something to put that woman firmly in her place. Not this, not death, and certainly not the revelation that she was a federal judge. He began to inch backward, discreetly slipping between houses, orchestrating his quiet departure before anyone could recall his involvement in the preceding events. Briggs spoke into his radio, his voice low and urgent. "Dispatch, this is Officer Briggs. We require a supervisor at 1542 Oakwood Drive. Incident involving a service animal." He swallowed hard. Potential lawsuit situation. Keller pulled him aside, their backs momentarily turned to the crowd, but Mariah's exceptionally sensitive hearing picked up their hushed exchange. "We stick to the story," Keller whispered with fierce intensity. "The dog was aggressive. They came for you. You couldn't avoid it." "But she's a federal judge," Briggs snarled. "This isn't some everyday occurrence. That's precisely why we must ensure our narrative is consistent." Keller interrupted. "This situation warrants serious legal attention. The union will support us, but only if our stories align perfectly." The crowd continued to swell as more neighbors emerged from their residences, drawn by the commotion. Several approached Mariah, offering quiet words of sympathy and encouragement. "I documented everything," a young woman informed her, kneeling beside her. "From the very instant they exited their vehicle. I will not erase it. My word. I am a witness." Another neighbor chimed in. "That canine did nothing to provoke this." Mariah acknowledged them, appreciative of their solidarity, yet consumed by her sorrow. Justice's form grew heavier in her embrace as the last vestiges of life departed him. Her world had abruptly plunged into a darkness far profounder than any she had experienced, even after losing her sight 15 years prior. A distant siren wailed, a response to Briggs's summons. "I demand accountability," Mariah declared, her voice resonating across the now hushed thoroughfare. "For justice for every individual who has endured this kind of oppressive authority." She turned her gaze toward the arriving officers. "This ordeal concludes now. It concludes with your accountability." Keller and Briggs exchanged uneasy glances as the siren intensified. Their careers, their futures, every achievement they had built flashed through their minds, all potentially obliterated in the moments it took to pull a trigger. In Mariah's arms, Justice lay motionless, his duty fulfilled until his very last breath, safeguarding the one he cherished most in existence. Even in death, his body shielded her from the officers who had ended his life. The house felt devoid of life. Mariah stood in her doorway, her hand trembling almost imperceptibly as she reached for the space where Justice would customarily guide her. The silence was overwhelming. One step forward, she murmured to herself. Muscle memory cultivated through years of Justice's gentle direction. She proceeded inside, counting each step and trailing her fingers along the familiar walls. Without Justice, her dwelling, once a haven, now felt like a hazardous obstacle course. She struck her hip against the edge of the hallway table, dislodging a framed photograph. The glass shattered upon impact with the floor. Mariah knelt with care, probing for the fragments. Her fingers first encountered the frame, then the image within. She possessed no need to see it to know its content. Herself and Justice on the courthouse steps, the day he successfully completed his specialized training. Her fingers traced the perimeter of the frame, sensing where the glass had fractured away. The doorbell chimed, startling her. She carefully placed the damaged frame on the table and proceeded cautiously to the door. "Who is it?" she inquired. "It is Mrs. Chen, Judge Ellison. I have brought some sustenance." Mariah opened the door. The aroma of home-prepared chicken soup filled the air. "You ought not to be preparing meals this evening," Mrs. Chen remarked kindly. "None of us can comprehend what transpired. It was dreadful. Utterly dreadful." "Thank you," Mariah replied, accepting the warm container. "Would you care to step inside?" "Merely for a moment. My husband is waiting in the automobile." Mrs. Chen assisted Mariah in placing the soup in the refrigerator. "The entire neighborhood is discussing this. Tom Rivera is coordinating efforts for individuals to provide declarations. We all witnessed the events unfold." Before departing, Mrs. Chen clasped Mariah's hand. "We stand with you, Your Honor. What they perpetrated was unjust." Throughout the evening, additional neighbors arrived. Tom Rivera presented bread from his wife. The Jacksons from down the street contributed a baked dish. Each visitor conveyed their indignation, offered their sympathies, and pledged their support as witnesses. However, once the final neighbor departed, the quiet returned, more oppressive than before. Mariah sat on her sofa, Justice's collar cradled in her hands. Her fingers traced the worn leather, the metallic tags that would jingle with his every movement. She pressed the collar to her chest and finally permitted herself to succumb to her emotions, weeping until her throat ached. The television provided a low murmur in the background. She had activated it for companionship, unable to tolerate the stillness. Abruptly, the reporter's words pierced through her sorrow. Statement from the police union concerning this morning's shooting of a service animal. Mariah lifted her head, dabbing away tears as she increased the volume. The East City Police Union issued the following declaration today. The reporter continued, officers responded to a 911 call reporting an aggressive dog threatening neighborhood children. Upon arrival, the animal displayed menacing behavior toward the officers, compelling them to undertake necessary actions to ensure their safety and that of bystanders. While we express regret for the outcome, our officers acted within protocol given the perilous circumstances. Mariah's grip tightened around Justice's collar. Liars, she uttered softly. He never threatened anyone. Her phone rang. It was her associate, Judge Roberts. Mariah, I just viewed the news. Are you unharmed? No, Raymond, I am not. Her voice faltered. They terminated justice and are now fabricating a narrative. I overheard their statement. It is appalling. Judge Roberts paused. The Chief Justice contacted me. Word is circulating within the judicial community. And there is apprehension, Mariah, regarding a judge's involvement in a high-profile incident with law enforcement. Mariah sat up straighter. Apprehension? My service animal was brutally killed by overzealous officers who are now disseminating falsehoods. I ought to be the recipient of concern, not the source of it. I understand. I comprehend. I am on your side. However, there are hushed suggestions that you should address this discreetly for the benefit of the judiciary. Address this discreetly? The phrase tasted acrid. You mean permit them to escape consequences? That is not what I conveyed. It is precisely what you implied. After concluding the call, Mariah remained immobile, Justice's collar still clutched in her hand. The very system to which she had dedicated her life was already consolidating its defenses. Not in her favor, but in defense of her dog's killers. A knock at the door diverted her thoughts. Judge Allison, Internal Affairs. May we engage in a brief conversation? Two detectives, a male and a female, sat opposite Mariah at her kitchen counter. They introduced themselves as Detectives Morgan and Perez. We understand this is a challenging period, Detective Morgan began, his tone laced with feigned empathy. However, we require your account of this morning's events. Mariah detailed every occurrence. Harold's documented animosity, Justice's placid demeanor, the officer's conflicting directives, the shot fired without preamble. And you are certain the canine did not aggress toward the officers? Detective Perez inquired. Justice was a meticulously trained service animal. He would never initiate aggression unless I were in peril. However, considering your condition, Morgan stated delicately, is it conceivable that you misconstrued the sequence of events? Mariah's countenance hardened. My visual impairment does not affect my auditory perception or my memory. Detective. I am acutely aware of precisely what transpired. Of course, Perez interjected smoothly. However, trauma can influence one's perception. And without the ability to see, there are numerous witnesses, Mariah interjected. Neighbors who observed the entire incident. Individuals possessing video recordings. The detectives exchanged glances. We have collected declarations from several observers, Morgan stated. Their accounts differ, and Officer Keller's report asserts that your dog charged at them, emitting aggressive barks. That is an untruth. His report also indicates that you were incapable of controlling the animal when instructed to do so. Mariah's hands formed tight fists on the table. Justice was under absolute command until your officers instigated chaos by issuing contradictory orders. Well, Perez remarked, closing her notebook, we shall continue our investigation. The body camera footage ought to provide clarity. I demand a copy of that footage, Mariah stated without hesitation. Morgan cleared his throat. Unfortunately, there appears to have been a technical malfunction. The recording became corrupted during the transfer process. Efforts are underway to retrieve it. Mariah did not believe him for an instant. How extraordinarily convenient. After the detectives departed, Mariah secured her door and leaned against it, a wave of exhaustion overwhelming her. She had spent decades within courtrooms and could discern falsehood and obstruction when she encountered them. They were constructing a facade of deception, brick by bureaucratic brick. She made her way to the kitchen for a glass of water when she detected it. The soft hum of an engine idling outside her residence. Moving cautiously toward the window, she slightly parted the blinds, a habitual action from a time when she possessed sight. "Is anyone present?" She called out to her unoccupied dwelling. Her neighbor Tom's voice reached her from his porch across the street. "An unmarked police vehicle is positioned there, observing your residence." Mariah felt a chill permeate her being. They just activated their lights. Tom phoned a moment later. "Now they are driving away." The message was unmistakable. "We are observing you. We know your address." Mariah navigated her dimly lit home, meticulously resecuring every latch. The day's events replayed in an incessant cycle within her mind. Justice's body succumbing, Keller's derisive tone, the detective's manipulative questioning, the surveillance vehicle outside her home. They presumed her blindness rendered her defenseless. They believed they could coerce her into silence. She returned to her kitchen table and sat down. Her fingers found Justice's collar once more, the metal cool against her skin. "You extinguished my dog's life," she whispered into the gloom. "But you will not extinguish my spirit." She reached for the digital recorder she employed for legal notations, her fingers locating the familiar controls with practiced dexterity. She initiated recording. Case notes, August 12th. Subject: violation of civil rights and unlawful termination of service animal justice. Badge designation SD 42781. Her voice gained strength with each word uttered. Perpetrators: Officers Daniel Briggs and Mark Keller. East Precinct. Witnesses: a minimum of 12 neighbors present at the scene. Evidence: multiple civilian video recordings contradicting the official report. She proceeded methodically, articulating the facts as she would for a legal case, identifying potential legal avenues, and noting individuals to contact. This was familiar terrain. The meticulous construction of a legal argument, brick by factual brick. First objective: secure all visual evidence before its potential disappearance. Second, lodge a formal complaint with the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, bypassing local channels that already exhibit indicators of suppression. Her fingers moved over Justice's collar as she spoke, drawing fortitude from their connection. "They believe that because I cannot see," she stated into the recorder, "I am incapable of defending myself. They are about to discover the extent of their miscalculation." The morning sun illuminated the kitchen windows, but Mariah Ellison found no comfort in its rays. The house felt more desolate than ever without the rhythmic click of Justice's nails on the hardwood floors or his gentle breaths beside her bed. She reached for her telephone and activated a familiar contact. "Helen, it is Mariah. I require your assistance." Helen Monroe's voice, unwavering as always, responded. "I am aware of the recent events. It is the primary topic of discussion in legal circles. State your needs. I require allies, individuals whom I can trust implicitly. Will you come here? And would you be so kind as to contact David Cho? If anyone possesses the expertise to navigate such a conflict, it is undoubtedly him. I shall arrive within the hour and will contact David immediately." Mariah concluded the call and remained seated at her kitchen table, her fingers gliding over the smooth wooden surface. For the first time in many years, she experienced a sense of disorientation. Without justice to provide guidance, even navigating her own residence presented increased challenges. However, it was not merely physical direction that she missed. It was his comforting presence, his warmth, and his unwavering devotion. The doorbell rang precisely 1 hour later. "It is Helen," a voice announced from the exterior. "David accompanies me." Mariah opened the door, and Helen immediately embraced her. Despite being 68 years of age, Helen Monroe carried herself with the same authoritative presence she had exuded on the federal bench for decades. "Judge Ellison," David Cho stated, his voice taut with suppressed indignation. "I am profoundly sorry to hear about justice. Thank you for coming, David." Mariah gestured them indoors. "Kindly refer to me as Mariah. We are not in a judicial setting today." They settled in her living room, Helen guiding Mariah to her preferred armchair. "I have already commenced preliminary research," David disclosed, retrieving documents from his briefcase. "Civil rights violations, contravention of the Americans with Disabilities Act, unlawful destruction of property, although I find the designation of justice as property abhorrent." He was family, Mariah replied softly. Indeed, he was, Helen concurred, and their actions were criminal. I need to understand the full scope of what I am confronting, Mariah declared. The police union has already issued their statement portraying justice as aggressive. The internal affairs detectives attempted to manipulate me yesterday, suggesting my perception was compromised due to my blindness. David's tone hardened. A predictable tactic. Discredit the victim. Protect the officers. I requested the body camera footage, Mariah continued. They assert it was lost during the transfer process. Lost? Helen scoffed. Too convenient, David concurred. I shall submit formal requests today demanding the preservation of all visual evidence. We will also request all radio communications. The transcript of the 911 call. I made some inquiries this morning, Mariah interjected. A clerk I trust at the precinct provided me with the incident report. It is replete with inaccuracies. She handed over her tablet. Helen read it aloud for all to hear. Officers responded to a 911 call concerning an aggressive canine. Owner incapable of maintaining control. Canine barked and lunged at officers. Officer Briggs discharged his weapon in defense of public safety. Helen's voice faded in disgust. It is a fabrication from beginning to end, Mariah stated. And observe who they cite as their principal witness. Harold Whitaker. Your neighbor. David inquired. The individual who initiated the call. The prejudiced neighbor who has been attempting to force me out of the neighborhood for years, Mariah clarified. The report extensively quotes his 911 call but conspicuously omits his coded remarks regarding individuals like her not belonging here. David was typing rapidly on his laptop. We must obtain the actual 911 recording, the unedited version. I have a contact at the dispatch center, Helen offered. I shall make the necessary communication. Mariah rose, pacing deliberately along the familiar route between her armchair and the window. There is more. Last night, an unmarked police vehicle was positioned outside my residence. They illuminated their lights before departing. Intimidation, David stated, his voice rising with indignation. They are attempting to silence you through fear. It will not be successful. Mariah declared with conviction. Helen's phone rang, and she moved into the kitchen to answer it. Upon her return, her expression was somber. My contact informs me that the 911 recording has been placed under restricted access. Only senior officers are now permitted to access it. Further concealment, David murmured. Mariah took a deep breath. I believe it is time to leverage my position. I have connections within the Department of Justice. If a federal judge cannot secure action on this matter, then who can? She dialed a number she rarely utilized. A direct line to the office of the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Thomas Bennett, an acquaintance from her law school days. Tom, it is Mariah Ellison. Mariah. His voice sounded strained. I was intending to contact you. I have heard of the incident. Then you comprehend the reason for my call. I require the Department of Justice to intervene. These officers terminated my service animal, and the department is now complicit in a cover-up. A heavy silence permeated the line. Mariah, I must be direct with you. There have been discussions at the highest echelons. The police union possesses formidable allies, and they are framing this as a situation of judicial overreaction. Overreaction. Mariah's voice escalated. They murdered my service dog. I understand. I comprehend, but he lowered his voice. I have been advised to inform you, for the benefit of the judiciary, to stand down. The words struck Mariah with the force of a physical blow. Stand down? She repeated, her knuckles whitening around the phone. My dog was brutally slain. Tom, I acknowledge the severity of the situation. However, pursuing this could introduce complications. The optics of a federal judge engaged in a public confrontation with law enforcement. The optics. Mariah cut him off. A blind, black woman had her service animal executed, and you are concerned with optics. Mariah, I implore you. I believed I could rely on you, Tom. My hands are bound, he stated quietly. I regret this outcome. She terminated the call without a farewell. Helen and David observed her, their faces etched with concern. The Department of Justice will not provide assistance, Mariah stated flatly. Apparently, I am expected to withdraw for the good of the judiciary. Unbelievable, Helen muttered. Not entirely, David remarked. The system protects its own. And at this juncture, those officers are being shielded by everyone, from their supervisor to the Department of Justice. Mariah nodded slowly. You are correct. This transcends the actions of two errant officers. It concerns a system that provides them sanctuary. Later that day, after court proceedings concluded and her colleagues had departed, Mariah remained alone in her chambers. The room was silent, save for the rhythmic ticking of the antique timepiece on her bookshelf. She reached into her satchel and withdrew Justice's collar, clutching it firmly in her fist. The metallic tags chimed softly against one another. For 28 years, she had presided over judicial proceedings, initially as a district judge, and subsequently elevated to the federal level. She had held faith in the system, defended it, and taken pride in her participation. Now, that identical system was advising her to disregard the injustice while her dog's killers operated with impunity. They are all interconnected, she whispered to the vacant room. The police, the union, internal affairs, even the judiciary, all providing mutual protection. The profound sense of betrayal settled upon her like a heavy shroud. This was not merely a confrontation with Briggs and Keller. It was a struggle against an entire apparatus designed to shield them. An apparatus of which she had been a part, and in which she had placed her trust. Justice's collar felt warm in her hand, its leather worn smooth from years of dedicated service. She ran her thumb over his identification tags, recalling the day she had first fastened this collar around his neck. He had been so young then, eager to serve, eager to protect. I will not allow them to conceal this, she declared, her voice now imbued with renewed strength. I will not permit them to bury you. The following afternoon, Mariah's doorbell rang. She moved with deliberate caution through her living room, mentally counting her steps, a practice that maintained her orientation even within familiar surroundings. The house felt more hollow without the familiar clicking of Justice's nails on the hardwood floors. Who is it? She inquired. Helen and David, Helen's steady voice responded. And we have brought someone we would like you to meet. Mariah opened the door. She could discern 3 sets of footsteps, detect the subtle lavender fragrance of Helen's perfume, and sense David's underlying nervousness in the way he shifted his weight.
Come in, Mariah invited, stepping aside.
Who is with you? Rosa Martinez, a new voice replied, warm and confident. A community activist who has been advocating fiercely in this city for 15 years. She took Mariah's extended hand, clasping it firmly in both of hers. Judge Alyson, what transpired with you and Justice is fundamentally unjust. I am here to lend my support. Mariah nodded, experiencing an immediate resonance with Rosa's forthright demeanor. Thank you for attending. Please, all of you, let us convene in the dining room. I have prepared coffee. They arranged themselves around her table, and Mariah could hear the rustling of papers as David unpacked his briefcase. I have been engaged in work since our last meeting, David began. Emergency motions have been filed to preserve all evidence, yet we are encountering obstacles. The department is invoking sovereign immunity regarding the body camera footage. Sovereign immunity, Mariah repeated, her voice tinged with bitterness. They are seeking refuge behind legal immunities intended for legitimate governmental functions, not for clandestine cover-ups. Precisely, Helen concurred. And Judge Raw has been assigned to adjudicate our motion for expedited discovery. His cooperation is lacking. Alan Raw, Mariah's brow furrowed. I was his mentor. I trained him when he first joined the bench. Well, he is deferring our hearing, David stated unequivocally. He claims his schedule is fully booked for the upcoming 3 weeks. Rosa emitted a sound of disdain. While evidence conveniently vanishes, Mariah tapped her fingers thoughtfully on the tabletop. They are employing procedural delays to exhaust our resources. A standard maneuver. She paused. What about witness testimony? Neighbors had been observing. That's an area where I've seen improvement, David remarked, his tone lifting. I've gathered testimonies from 4 individuals who witnessed the entire event. Mrs. Chen from the opposite side of the street, the entire Ramirez family, and Jordan Taylor, the university student residing next door. And what did they convey? Mariah inquired. They all affirmed that Justice remained composed, not confrontational. They stated the officers were issuing conflicting commands, and that Briggs fired without any prior provocation. David's voice grew stern, and they all recalled Keller's subsequent remark about having the animal subdued. Helen emitted a sound of disgust. It's a clear instance of excessive force by law enforcement. Yet, they persist in their denial. Rosa interjected, "Witness accounts will not suffice. The establishment protects its own." "You're quite right," Mariah conceded. "We require additional leverage." She turned towards Rosa. "Helen mentioned you organize demonstrations." "That is accurate," Rosa replied. "I've been doing so since I was 20 years old. Nothing compels those in power to listen quite like the collective voice of hundreds speaking in unison." "What are your thoughts?" David asked. "The courthouse, the police precinct, and the municipal building," Rosa responded without hesitation. "3 protest locations, rotating daily to maintain consistent pressure. I've already initiated contact with organizations advocating for disability rights, civil liberties, and animal welfare. This issue transcends all divides." "Can you secure media attention?" Helen inquired. "I've already received commitments from 2 local television stations and a national podcast," Rosa stated. "Social media is already abuzz. The hashtag #JusticeForJustice began trending last night." Mariah nodded. Impressed. "We need public outcry, but we also must identify the weaknesses in their legal defense." She rose and moved to a compact desk in the corner, returning with a digital recording device. "I've been analyzing this from a judicial perspective, identifying their vulnerabilities." She pressed the play button, and her own voice filled the room. Potential weaknesses in the police defense. First, the 911 call. If we can demonstrate that Harold Whitaker's call was intentionally false and racially prejudiced, it invalidates everything that followed. Second, officer training records. If Briggs and Keller lack adequate training concerning service animals, it constitutes an ADA violation. Third, the chain of custody for the body camera footage. Who handled it between the recording and its supposed disappearance? David's chair creaked as he leaned forward. These are precisely the technical challenges we need to introduce, particularly the ADA aspect, which grants us federal jurisdiction regardless of Raw's actions. "I can assist with the 911 call," Helen offered. "My former law clerk works at the dispatch center. She might be willing to jeopardize her position to retrieve that recording for us." "And I can investigate their training," Rosa added. "I know some officers who have retired from the department. They will speak up if they believe it serves a just cause." Mariah nodded, experiencing a surge of optimism for the first time since Justice passed away. "We are approaching this from every conceivable angle: legal, public engagement, and procedural." "There is one more consideration," David said, his voice suddenly uncertain. "I believe we should explore filing a personal lawsuit against Harold Whitaker. He initiated this with a fraudulent 911 call. We must compel him to testify under oath regarding his statements and motivations." "I find that idea appealing," Helen mused. "I concur," Mariah agreed. "Draft the complaint, David. We will submit it tomorrow." "I will commence the process for those protest permits immediately," Rosa declared, her chair scraping as she stood. "The initial demonstration will take place tomorrow at noon, outside the courthouse." "I should caution you all," Mariah stated, her demeanor growing serious. "They will attempt to undermine our credibility. They will scrutinize your backgrounds, seeking any perceived flaws." "Let them try," Rosa responded firmly. "I've been subjected to every insult imaginable. It will not deter me." "My reputation can withstand their scrutiny," Helen added. "And I have been awaiting a case of this magnitude throughout my entire career," David concluded. "I am fully committed." Mariah felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. "Thank you, all of you." As they continued their strategic discussions, Mariah's phone vibrated with a news alert. David checked it. "Take a look at this. Your neighbor, Mrs. Chen, has posted a video of the shooting online. It's already garnered 50,000 views." "What does it depict?" Mariah asked. "Everything," David replied, his voice thick with emotion. Justice standing calmly. The officers shouting, then the shot. "They can no longer control this narrative," Rosa stated, her voice resonating with determination. "People are witnessing the truth." They dedicated several hours to strategizing legal maneuvers and public actions. As dusk began to fall, Helen and David gathered their notes. "I should go and prepare those legal submissions for tomorrow," David announced. And I need to make those calls regarding the permits, Rosa added. As they exchanged farewells at the door, Mariah heard it, faint at first, then growing louder. Voices in the street chanting in unison. "What is happening?" she inquired. "My heavens," Helen breathed. "There are people gathered at the end of your block. Dozens of them." Rosa stepped onto the porch. "I did not orchestrate this. This is spontaneous." The chant became more distinct, echoing through the evening air. "Justice for justice, justice for justice." "They arrived on their own accord," David observed, his voice filled with astonishment. "The community is rallying behind you." Mariah stepped onto her porch, feeling the evening breeze on her face. The chanting grew louder as the crowd noticed her presence. She raised her hand in acknowledgement, and the cheers intensified. In that precise moment, standing on her porch with her newfound allies beside her, Mariah felt an internal transformation, from profound sorrow to unwavering resolve, from victimhood to active resistance. The protests had commenced without any deliberate planning on their part. The spark had ignited on its own. Mariah's heels clicked against the polished marble of the courthouse corridors. Her walking cane tapped with a steady rhythm as she navigated her way to Judge Alan Raw's chambers, a route intimately familiar from years of mentoring him. The characteristic aroma of aged wood and leather-bound files permeated the air. "Judge Allison," his secretary greeted her with a warm smile. "Judge Raw is expecting you." The door swung open, and Alan's footsteps approached. "Mariah, please, come in." His voice retained its usual smooth cadence, yet a subtle undercurrent of unease was perceptible to her finely tuned senses. "Thank you for agreeing to see me, Alan." She settled gracefully into the chair he indicated, placing her cane discreetly beside her. "Of course. I've been keeping abreast of the developments concerning your service animal. A truly regrettable situation." He cleared his throat. "Would you care for some coffee?" "No, thank you." Mariah sat upright, exuding an air of dignified composure. "I shall be direct, Alan. Your protracted delay in processing our discovery motions is unacceptable. The body camera footage is crucial evidence, and each day of postponement escalates the risk of its permanent loss." Papers rustled on his desk. "Mariah, you are aware of the immense backlog in our court dockets. I must adhere to proper procedural protocols." "Proper procedure?" Her voice remained steady. "You and I both know that emergency motions take precedence when the preservation of evidence is at stake. I instructed you on this principle during your inaugural month on the bench." A prolonged silence ensued. When he finally spoke, his voice adopted that polished, almost political smoothness she had always cautioned him against. "The police union has submitted counter-motions. There are jurisdictional questions that require careful consideration. These matters necessitate time." "Time we do not possess," Mariah interjected. "Alan, I personally mentored you. I championed your appointment. You understand what is just in this situation." His chair creaked as he leaned back. "Perhaps that is precisely what makes this so challenging. You taught me to consider all perspectives, to maintain judicial impartiality." "Do not employ my own teachings to justify obstruction," Steele entered her voice. "This is not about impartiality. This is about justice being buried beneath a mountain of paperwork while vital evidence vanishes. I understand your emotional investment in your dog. This is not about emotion, Alan. It is about law enforcement officers discharging their weapons at a service animal without justification, followed by an attempt to conceal their actions. This is about a system prioritizing its own interests above the pursuit of justice." She leaned forward. "You know me, Alan. Would I be pursuing this matter with such vigor if I lacked absolute certainty?" "Your certainty is not the issue." His voice grew colder, more distant. "There are broader considerations at play." "Indeed, there are. Such as integrity, the courage to confront corruption, and all the principles I instilled in you regarding a judge's solemn duty." Silence descended upon the room. When he spoke again, his tone was dismissive. "I will review the motions at my earliest convenience. That is the extent of my commitment." Mariah stood, a heavy sense of disappointment weighing on her. "I had anticipated a different response from you, Alan." She departed his chambers but paused just outside when she overheard his telephone ring. An instinct within her compelled her to wait, to listen. "Officer Keller," Alan's voice carried through the closed door. "Yes, I have just concluded a conversation with her. Mariah's breath hitched. Do not concern yourself, Alan continued, his voice low but clearly audible to her acute hearing. I will deliberately prolong this case until it becomes untenable. By the time I have finished, any pertinent evidence will have long since disappeared. A brief pause. Yes, I am fully aware of the potential ramifications. My nomination to the appellate court will remain unaffected. The betrayal struck Mariah with the force of a physical blow. Her own former student was compromising justice for personal advancement. We all must safeguard our own interests, Alan was articulating. Simply ensure that everything remains quiescent on your end. I shall manage the legal proceedings. Mariah's fingers tightened around her cane as she walked away. Her steps were measured and controlled, despite the simmering rage and hurt coursing through her. The marble corridors seemed to have acquired a chilling aura, tainted by a corruption she had never suspected ran so deep. She made her way to the courthouse steps, the afternoon sun casting a warm glow upon her face. The sound of protesters reached her ears. Hundreds of voices chanting her name, demanding justice. Judge Ellison! Judge Ellison! The chants intensified as individuals noticed her presence. She could discern the rustling of signs in the breeze, the shuffling of feet on the concrete, and the palpable energy of the assembled crowd pulsing through the air. We stand with you, a voice shouted, and the sentiment was immediately echoed by others. The stark contrast struck her profoundly. Behind her lay the corrupt machinery of a system she had faithfully served for decades, now revealed to be decaying from within. Before her stood the unvarnished voice of the populace, raw and authentic in their fervent demand for justice, her fists clenched at her sides. Alan's betrayal inflicted a deep wound, not merely on a personal level, but on her fundamental faith in the institution itself. She had guided him, shaped him, placed her trust in him, and he had unequivocally chosen power over principle. The collective energy of the crowd washed over her, their support almost tangible in its intensity. Their passion both uplifted her spirit and amplified the bitter taste of betrayal lingering in her mouth. These individuals believed in justice, believed in her fight. Meanwhile, the very system ostensibly established to uphold justice was actively conspiring to subvert it. Justice for justice. The chant commenced anew, swelling and reverberating through the crowd. Mariah stood erect on the courthouse steps, a figure of inherent dignity despite the internal tempest raging within her heart. The betrayal by her former student had profoundly shaken her, yet the resounding voices of the people fortified her resolve. If the established system proved unwilling to serve justice, she would forge an alternative path. The stark dichotomy between the insidious corruption festering within and the righteous indignation emanating from without crystallized her purpose. She was no longer merely fighting for justice. She was now engaged in a battle for the very essence of justice itself. The evening news blared from Mariah's television as she prepared her dinner. She kept it on for ambient sound, an ingrained habit from before her vision loss. Breaking news tonight. The anchor's voice delivered that insincere concern that invariably made Mariah's skin crawl. Questions are being raised regarding federal judge Mariah Ellison's competence to manage a service animal. Sources close to the investigation suggest the judge may have been unable to adequately control her dog due to her disability. Mariah's hands, poised over the cutting board, stilled. The handle of the knife grew slick in her grip. Anonymous reports indicate Judge Ellison has experienced struggles with mental health issues, the anchor continued, potentially clouding her judgment regarding the incident. The telephone rang, causing her to jump. It was Helen Monroe. Mariah, are you witnessing this travesty? I am listening to it at this very moment. Mariah's voice was strained. They are truly resorting to such tactics, aren't they? It is utterly despicable, Helen spat. Exploiting your blindness and fabricating anonymous sources about mental health. We both know this is directly from the police union's playbook. Outside her window, Mariah could hear Harold Whitaker's shrill voice carrying across the yard. He was speaking loudly to another neighbor. Threatened me, you know, right there on the sidewalk, Whitaker declared. That dog of hers was always aggressive, but she wouldn't listen when I tried to warn her. It's a dangerous situation having someone like that in the neighborhood. Mariah's free hand clenched into a tight fist. The faucet spread like a virulent contagion, seeping insidiously into the community's collective consciousness. Her phone vibrated with a text alert. David Cho was sending updates from the protest at City Hall. She pressed play on the voice message. Mariah, they are advancing with riot gear, instructing people to disperse, but they have effectively blocked the exit routes. There are families present, elderly individuals. Wait, they are deploying tear gas. They are charging the crowd. The message abruptly cut off amidst sounds of pandemonium. Mariah switched back to the news broadcast, breaking coverage from City Hall, where law enforcement is responding to what they are labeling an unlawful assembly by protest groups. Multiple arrests are being reported as authorities endeavor to restore public order. Her doorbell rang. Then again, and again. Angry voices carried through the door. Come out, Judge. Face what you have instigated. Justice for our police officers. Heavy fists pounded on her door. Mariah stood perfectly still, her heart racing, but her mind remained clear. She reached for her phone. 911. What is your emergency? This is Federal Judge Mariah Ellison. There is a mob outside my residence. The TV anchor's voice cut through the din in related news. We are receiving reports that Judge Ellison resides at 1542 Oak Grove Drive. Mariah's blood ran cold. They had just broadcast her home address live on air. The pounding on her door intensified. Someone began rattling her windows. Stay on the line, Judge Ellison, the dispatcher's voice instructed. Units are en route. More voices joined the throng outside. Car doors slammed, engines revved. Go back where you came from. Can't even control a dog. Through it all, she could discern Harold Whitaker's voice, gleeful and encouraging. That's right. Show her she can't get away with threatening decent folks. Mariah moved away from the windows, phone pressed firmly to her ear. The house, so intimately familiar through touch and memory, now felt like a suffocating trap. Each resounding bang on the door made her flinch, yet she resolutely refused to cower. Police sirens grew louder, approaching rapidly. The crowd began to disperse, but not before someone hurled an object that shattered violently against a front window. Hours later, after the police had concluded their statements and the area had been cleared, Mariah sat in her study. The crunch of glass under the repairman's boots echoed as he worked to board up a window. The house felt irrevocably violated. Her sanctuary had been tainted. Her phone had not ceased its incessant buzzing with updates. More protesters had been apprehended at City Hall. Tear gas had necessitated hospitalization for 3 elderly demonstrators. The police union was vociferously demanding an investigation into her mental fitness to serve as a judge. The television droned on in the background. Sources question whether a blind judge can adequately assess threatening situations. Mariah reached for her digital recorder, pressing the familiar buttons. Her voice was steady, undeterred by the escalating turmoil. They perceive blindness as a deficiency, she began. They will soon discover it is my most potent asset. She clicked off the recorder, listening to the dissonant sounds emanating from her damaged home. The repairman's hammer blows. The mournful whisper of the wind through the shattered windowpane. Distant sirens wailing. Harold Whitaker's voice still carrying from his yard, diligently spinning more fabrications. The system was now baring its fangs, determined to dismantle her using every available weapon. They had attacked her visual impairment, her mental well-being, her personal safety, anything to discredit and silence her. The coordinated nature of these assaults was unmistakably clear. From the sensationalized news reports to the leaked residential address, from Whitaker's insidious rumors to the police union's character assassinations, every element was interconnected. All part of the same monolithic apparatus grinding relentlessly against her. But they had fundamentally miscalculated. Each offensive maneuver, each blatant faucet, each attempt to break her spirit only served to galvanize her resolve. They believed her vulnerability made her susceptible. They were profoundly mistaken. Her perceived weakness had compelled her to cultivate a heightened acuity of hearing, to perceive subtle nuances that eluded others, to navigate darkness that would leave most utterly helpless. The repairman finished his task, his heavy boots echoing on her porch as he departed. Mariah remained seated in her chair, surrounded by the physical remnants of their intimidation attempt, and began to meticulously formulate her subsequent course of action. They had revealed their desperation tonight. Now, she would demonstrate her formidable strength. Mariah's phone vibrated just before midnight. It displayed an unfamiliar number. She almost dismissed the call, but an inexplicable impulse prompted her to answer. Judge Ellison. The voice was male, young, and laced with nervousness. This is Officer Luis Ramirez. Please, do not hang up. She sat straighter in her chair. I am listening. I was present that day, behind Briggs and Keller. What they did, what we did, it was not right. His voice trembled audibly. I have something you need to see. The actual footage. Mariah's heart pounded, but she maintained a steady tone. How can I be certain this is not another trap? Because I took an oath to protect and serve. What happened to justice? It goes against everything that badge represents. He paused. I am risking my career. Possibly more. But I cannot find peace knowing what truly transpired. They arranged to meet in 30 minutes at a 24-hour diner located on the other side of town.
Maria contestet David cho imediatan.
I require your presence, she stated. And please bring your recording equipment. The diner's bell chimed melodically as they entered. The night waitress, engrossed in her crossword puzzle, barely glanced up. David guided Mariah to a secluded corner booth where a young man, dressed in civilian attire, sat nervously fiddling with a coffee cup. Officer Ramirez. Mariah inquired softly. Yes, His voice quivered slightly. Thank you for coming. They ordered coffee they would not consume. Ramirez spoke in hushed tones, his gaze frequently darting towards the entrance. I downloaded the footage before they had the chance to erase it, he confided, sliding a USB drive across the table. Briggs and Keller were unaware I had access to the cloud backup. David promptly connected the drive to his laptop. Mariah listened with intense concentration as he began to describe the events he had witnessed. Justice is completely calm, David whispered. He's standing perfectly still beside you. Briggs is shouting, but the dog isn't even barking. He continued his narration. Keller is deliberately obstructing your path. Briggs has his hand on his weapon before Justice even makes a move. The dog only steps forward when Briggs lunges at you. Mariah's hands clenched beneath the table. And then, David's voice hardened. They are laughing. Briggs says, blind, expletive, won't be so high and mighty now. Keller congratulates him on his shot. The coffee cups rattled as Ramirez's hands shook uncontrollably. There's more, he stated. They contacted Harold Whitaker later that day to give him a heads up about you. They said they would handle the problem. It was orchestrated, Mariah breathed. They were waiting for an excuse. The entire department is corrupt, Ramirez confessed. But this, shooting a service dog, targeting a federal judge. I couldn't remain silent. You are exceptionally brave, Mariah said softly. But once this becomes public, they will know it was you. I am aware, his voice was resigned, yet imbued with a profound determination. My uncle lost his guide dog to trigger-happy officers in California. History continues to repeat itself because good people choose silence. They spent the following hour in meticulous planning. David meticulously copied the footage multiple times. Rosa Martinez joined them, bringing her laptop and her expertise in social media engagement. We need to release this strategically, Rosa advised, typing rapidly. I have connections with major news organizations, but social media will disseminate it far more quickly. Once it goes viral, they will be unable to contain it. We should prepare statements, David added, from witnesses, other service dog handlers, and police accountability experts. We need to build a wave they cannot possibly stop. Mariah nodded. Officer Ramirez, are you absolutely certain about this? There is no turning back. I am certain, Your Honor. His voice was stronger now. Some principles hold greater significance than a badge. They worked throughout the night in David's office. Rosa crafted compelling social media posts while David prepared the necessary legal documentation. Mariah released a declaration, her voice imbued with the full gravitas of her authority. At the first light of day, Rosa poised her finger above the send button. The video was prepped on numerous online spheres, poised to detonate across the digital landscape. This will irrevocably alter everything, she stated. It's already done so, Mariah responded, her thoughts on Ramirez's fortitude. Rosa initiated the broadcast. Within moments, the alerts commenced. 10,000 views, Rosa announced. 20,000, she added, with comments pouring in. Esteemed activists are sharing it. David's phone began to ring. CNN requires a statement. So does MSNBC. 50,000 views, 100,000. It's currently trending across the nation. Outside, A cacophony of car horns erupted. The rhythmic chanting intensified as throngs congregated in the thoroughfares. Mariah's device vibrated ceaselessly with incoming communications from journalists, associates, and sympathizers. The police associations are attempting to refute it, Rosa remarked. However, individuals are meticulously scrutinizing the footage frame by frame. They cannot evade accountability. 200,000 views, 500,000. Every prominent news network is reporting on it. Through her office window, Mariah could discern the growing surge of the crowd. The cadences of their calls had shifted, no longer solely aggrieved, but exultant. We possess irrefutable evidence. We possess irrefutable evidence. 1 million views, Rosa whispered. It's ubiquitous. David placed a hand on Mariah's shoulder. You're a trending topic on every platform. There are calls for the apprehension of Briggs and Keller. The mayor's office is inundated with inquiries. The sun ascended fully, its warmth bathing Mariah's countenance through the glass. For the first time since Justice's passing, a faint smile graced her lips. Not one of elation, for the sorrow remained acutely felt, but of optimism. The verity had been unveiled. The world could finally comprehend. The voices of the demonstrators carried with distinct clarity. Justice for justice. Justice for justice. Mariah rose, adjusting her blazer. What transpires next? The entire metropolis is mobilizing, Rosa stated. Thousands are converging downtown. They're dubbing it the March for Justice. We ought to be present, David asserted. Mariah nodded, her smile broadening. The truth had always been her most potent instrument. Now, it was finally piercing their fabrications. The morning's leading headlines struck with the force of a physical blow. Corrupt officer apprehended. Officer accused of evidence tampering. Mariah's hands trembled as David recited the newspaper's account aloud in her kitchen. Officer Luis Ramirez, aged 30, was taken into custody late last evening on multiple charges, including evidence manipulation, violation of departmental protocols, and unauthorized acquisition of classified information. Sources within the department suggest potential links to illicit drug operations. Drug trafficking. Mariah struck the table with her hand. He's never engaged with narcotics in his life. They're adhering to their established strategy, David declared grimly. Discredit the informant. Ruin their reputation. Rosa burst through the doorway, her heels echoing rapidly on the floor. It's worse. They ransacked his residence at 3 a.m, planting illicit substances. His neighbors captured it on video, but the recordings are being systematically removed. Mariah's phone vibrated. Helen Monroe, her retired judicial acquaintance, was calling. Activate Channel 7, Helen instructed without preamble. They're about to announce the verdict regarding the footage. David retrieved the remote. Judge Alan Raw's self-satisfied visage dominated the screen as he read from a prepared statement. Following a thorough review of chain of custody concerns, this court deems the purported body camera recording inadmissible. Officer Ramirez procured this material through unauthorized access, contravening numerous departmental procedures. Furthermore, the recording exhibits indicators of potential fabrication. Fabrications. Rosa bellowed at the television. We possess the original files. The metadata confirms their disregard for factual evidence, Mariah stated softly. Their sole concern is authority. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Briggs and Keller. Both officers were attired in immaculate uniforms, their badges gleaming. Keller's rehearsed smirk exuded disingenuous empathy. We sympathize with Officer Ramirez, he articulated smoothly. The pressures of the profession can sometimes lead exemplary officers astray. We trust he will receive the necessary assistance. Briggs nodded, perfectly embodying his role. Our department maintains an unwavering stance against corruption. The system has functioned precisely as intended. David muted the television, uttering an expletive. They intend to obliterate him. Make an example of him. Mariah's phone remained incessantly active. Texts and calls inundated her from supporters, but also from anonymous sources delivering menacing messages. Race traitor. Know your place. Cease or face consequences. Rosa perused some of the social media commentary. They're labeling him a cartel operative now, alleging he accepted payment from drug syndicates to malign the department. His entire existence, Mariah murmured. They are dismantling his entire existence because he conveyed the truth. The day progressed with agonizing slowness. News channels alternated between footage of Ramirez in restraints and analyses from experts discussing law enforcement protocols. Each passing hour brought a fresh onslaught of character assassination. His high school disciplinary record has been disclosed, Rosa reported. They are emphasizing a confrontation he was involved in at 16, distorting it into gang-related violence. His financial statements, too, David added. They are alleging suspicious deposits, yet these represent his grandmother's medical expenses. He has been assisting with her care. Near sunset, heavy footsteps approached Mariah's front entrance. Something was slid beneath the door. A solitary sheet of paper. David retrieved it. His sharp inhalation conveyed everything Mariah needed to comprehend. "What does it state?" she inquired. David's voice was taut with indignation. "Abandon this pursuit, or the next instance will not involve the canine." The room fell into silence, punctuated only by the distant hum of traffic. Mariah's hands sought Justice's collar on the side table, her fingers tracing the worn leather. The tag still tinkled softly. A phantom of brighter mornings. "They are monitoring the residence," Rosa announced, peering through the curtains. "An unmarked vehicle is stationed across the street." "Let them observe," Mariah replied, though her voice trembled slightly. Her phone buzzed again, this time from Ramirez's sister. "They refuse to permit me to see him," she sobbed. "They claim he is in protective custody, but his legal counsel cannot contact him either." Mariah clutched Justice's collar more tightly, the metal tags pressing into her palm. The recollection of that morning resurfaced vividly. Justice's warm fur, his steadfast companionship, the sound of his steady breathing. Then the gunshot, the abrupt stillness. "You believe I will concede," she whispered, her voice gaining resolve. "You underestimate me." The words lingered in the air, a defiant riposte to the day's accumulated setbacks. Justice's collar felt warm in her grasp, as if still imbued with a resonance of his loyal spirit. David gently touched her shoulder. "Mariah, perhaps we should—" "No," she interjected. "They extinguished my companion. They are annihilating the life of an honorable man. They imagine threats will silence me." Her fingers traced Justice's appellation on the tag one final time. "They are utterly unaware of the magnitude of what they have initiated." Rosa's phone chimed with another notification. "They are transferring Ramirez tonight. Maximum security, as if he were a dangerous criminal." "He understood," Mariah stated softly. "He knew this would transpire, and he proceeded regardless because it was the ethically sound course of action." Outside, the engine of the unmarked vehicle sputtered to life. Headlights swept across the living room walls as it departed, a stark reminder of their perpetual surveillance and anticipation. The caller's tags jingled one last time as Mariah set it down. The sound seemed to reverberate through the hushed dwelling, as if Justice himself remained present, still standing guard, still championing rectitude. The night enveloped Mariah's abode like a heavy shroud. She sat cross-legged within Justice's vacant canine bed, her fingers idly caressing the soft fabric. The house felt oppressively silent, unnaturally still without the rhythm of his respiration or the soft click of his claws on the polished wooden floors. Every shadow, every creak sent a tremor of apprehension through her. Without Justice there to alert her to peril, the darkness seemed more profound than ever. His bed still retained his distinctive aroma, that comforting blend of clean fur and the lavender-infused shampoo she employed during their weekly ablutions. "I'm uncertain if I can continue this any longer," she whispered into the empty expanse. Her hand encountered a stray strand of fur embedded in the material, constricting her throat. "I am not as resilient as everyone presumes." The doorbell's chime startled her. "Who is it?" she called out, her voice betraying a tremor she wished to conceal. "Helen Monroe," came the familiar reply. "And I've brought that Earl Grey you favor." Mariah navigated cautiously toward the door, meticulously counting each step, a process she typically undertook with assurance when Justice accompanied her. She unlatched it after confirming the security chain. "You appear utterly depleted," Helen remarked with unvarnished candor. The fragrance of peppermint tea wafted in as she entered. "When was the last time you experienced slumber?" "Rest feels akin to surrender," Mariah confessed, following Helen's footsteps into the kitchen. "Every time I close my eyes, I recall that gunshot." Helen's chair scraped against the floor as she settled in. The delicate clinking of teacups and the pour of steaming liquid filled the pervasive silence. Do you recall the day you pledged your oath as a federal judge? Undoubtedly. Mariah cradled the warm mug Helen placed in her hands. The proudest occasion of my life. You stood there, hand raised, and vowed to uphold justice. Not when it was convenient. Not when it was safe. You vowed to uphold it, unequivocally. That was prior to my awareness of the extent of the corruption, Mariah stated bitterly. Prior to witnessing them annihilate an honorable man for speaking truth. Prior to them murdering my canine in plain sight and evading consequence. Evading consequence, thus far, Helen corrected gently. You are not a neophyte legal counsel susceptible to intimidation. You are a federal judge, Mariah Ellison. You have devoted decades to comprehending the intricate workings of this system from its core. The beverage warmth seemed to permeate Mariah's chest, counteracting the chilling apprehension that had taken root. They wield absolute dominion. They possess coercive power. Helen countered, you possess something superior. You possess the law itself. They are so accustomed to asserting their will through brute force that they disregard that true potency originates from justice, not aggression. Another knock at the door interrupted their exchange. Rosa's voice called out, Judge Ellison, it's Rosa Martinez. Helen admitted her, and Rosa's rapid footsteps approached the table. The community is inquiring about you. They express concern. They ought to be concerned for Ramirez, Mariah declared. He is the one imperiled. You fail to grasp, Rosa stated, drawing up a chair. You are their beacon of hope. Every instance you enter that courthouse with your head held high, it demonstrates to them that defiance against oppressors is achievable, even without justice. Mariah's voice faltered on his name. Especially without justice, Rosa insisted. They presumed his demise would break you. Prove how profoundly mistaken they are. Helen's hand covered Mariah's. Do you recall that case from last year, the one concerning the immigrant children denied educational access? The district employed every conceivable stratagem to impede those children's enrollment, Mariah recalled. And you unearthed 7 distinct legal precedents they had overlooked. You constructed your case with such meticulous precision that they were unable to circumvent it. That situation was distinct, Mariah protested. That occurred within my chambers, where adherence to protocol is paramount. Protocols are invariably crucial, Helen affirmed firmly. They are merely counting on your forgetfulness. They desire you to be emotionally compromised, reactive. They anticipate a forceful confrontation, but you must engage strategically. Rosa's chair creaked as she leaned forward. The demonstrations continue to escalate. The public is incensed regarding Ramirez. We can harness that fervor, but they require to witness you leading the vanguard. Not through coercion, Helen interjected swiftly. Through authority, through dignity, with the full weight of federal statute underpinning your actions. Mariah's fingers again found Justice's collar. But this time, rather than sorrow, she felt an emergent sensation. Purpose, unwavering resolve. The identical ardor that had propelled her to embrace the judiciary in the first instance. They erroneously believe that my blindness renders me incapable of perceiving them clearly, she articulated deliberately. However, I have dedicated my entire existence to discerning what others overlook. Every particularity, every inconsistency, every unresolved thread they have carelessly left dangling. Now you are thinking like a judge once more, Helen commented approvingly. The populace is prepared, Rosa added. They simply require direction, a strategic approach. Mariah straightened in her chair, her hands now steady as she placed down her teacup. The oppressive burden of apprehension and uncertainty began to dissipate, supplanted by something more formidable, the unyielding core of justice that had sustained her through decades on the bench. They are accustomed to individuals confronting them with anger, she stated. They understand how to manage demonstrations and outrage, but they are ill-equipped to contend with someone intimately familiar with their methods and thoroughly versed in their playbook. And who possesses allies in positions of influence? Helen reminded her. And an entire community rallying behind her, Rosa appended. The vacant dog bed in the corner still throbbed like an unhealed wound, yet Mariah sensed Justice's spirit beside her, urging her onward. Not with vociferous barks, but with the same unwavering devotion he had perpetually displayed. Strategically, not aggressively, she reiterated, savoring the words. They will not anticipate such an approach. They are so accustomed to exerting their dominance that they have forgotten the true essence of justice. The nascent morning light permeated the study's windows as Mariah's fingers glided over the braille-embossed legal volumes spread across her desk. The familiar raised dots beneath her fingertips felt like old companions, guiding her through decades of legal precedent. Helen was situated nearby, papers rustling as she meticulously sifted through case files, while David Cho paced the room, his footsteps rapid and purposeful. "Herein lies their oversight," Mariah declared, drawing a particular volume closer. "They anticipate a conventional wrongful death claim, a matter they can easily subvert within local jurisdictions where Judge Raw and his associates can quash it." "They have their standard strategy prepared," David concurred, halting his pacing. "Delaying tactics, jurisdictional challenges, suppression of evidence. I have witnessed it countless times." Mariah's fingers moved with increasing swiftness over the braille text, locating the precise section she required. However, there is an element they have neglected. Section 242 of Title 18. Helen's chair creaked as she leaned forward. The Federal Civil Rights Statute. "That is seldom invoked." "Precisely," Mariah affirmed, a hint of satisfaction coloring her tone. "It entirely bypasses local jurisdiction. When law enforcement deliberately infringes upon constitutional rights under the guise of authority, particularly against protected groups, which I belong to both as an individual with a disability and as a black woman, it becomes a federal concern." David's footsteps quickened with burgeoning excitement. "They are incapable of seeking refuge behind qualified immunity either. Service animals are afforded protection under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Justice was not merely a pet. He was, legally speaking, medical apparatus." "More than that," Helen added, papers shuffling, "the body camera footage may be deemed inadmissible in local proceedings, but federal evidentiary standards differ. We can issue a subpoena for the original files directly from the manufacturer." Mariah nodded, her hands transitioning to her laptop, her fingers dancing across the keyboard as she commenced drafting. "We must construct this like a pyramid, each element reinforcing the ones above it, leaving no vulnerabilities for them to exploit." The room filled with the synchronized sounds of typing and rustling documents as their collaborative effort intensified. David initiated contact with representatives from the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. Helen reached out to her network of retired judiciary colleagues. Each communication served to fortify their case with an additional stratum of support. "Judge Martinez in the Ninth Circuit owes me a professional courtesy," Helen stated following a call. "She is amenable to submitting an amicus curiae brief concerning the systemic misuse of qualified immunity in service animal litigation." "Excellent," Mariah remarked, continuing to type. "And Professor Chen from Yale Law has consented to provide expert testimony regarding the Americans with Disabilities Act. We are not merely constructing a lawsuit, we are establishing a foundational framework for subsequent legal actions." David's phone vibrated. Rosa reports that the protest contingents are expanding. Church congregations are now participating. Veterans as well, following the news of their mistreatment of a service animal. "Public pressure is beneficial," Mariah acknowledged. "However, on this occasion, we are not reliant upon it. This case will be adjudicated solely on its legal merits." Hours elapsed as their work progressed. The afternoon sun shifted its arc across the room. Mariah's housekeeper delivered sustenance they scarcely consumed, their focus entirely engrossed in their undertaking. "Observe this recurring pattern," Helen commented, spreading out a collection of reports. 3 additional instances within the preceding year where law enforcement discharged service canines, all subsequently suppressed in local tribunals, all employing identical tactics. "Incorporate them into the filing," Mariah directed. "Demonstrate that this is not an isolated occurrence. Illustrate its systematic nature." Her fingers moved across a braille display, scrutinizing each paragraph for absolute precision. Every utterance carries consequence. Every citation must be immaculate. David ceased his perambulation to lean over the desk. "He will endeavor to portray you as emotionally driven, as pursuing a personal vendetta." "Let them attempt it," Mariah responded calmly. "The filing speaks for itself. Pure jurisprudence, unadulterated fact, irrefutable precedent. No emotional sentiment is required, although, by all accounts, they merit our righteous indignation." The resonance of collective chanting drifted through the windows, intensifying as evening descended. "Justice for justice. Justice for justice." Helen gently touched Mariah's shoulder. They are assembling once more. There must be hundreds out there. Thousands, David corrected, gazing out the window. And news vehicles as well. Mariah saved her work with a few keystrokes. The media's attention is advantageous, but it is not our primary focus. By the time this filing is lodged with the federal docket tomorrow morning, the commentary disseminated through the news channels will be rendered inconsequential. The legal machinery will already be in motion. She stood, stretching muscles stiffened from prolonged exertion. David guided her to the window, where the chants crescendoed. The evening air carried the palpable spirit of determination, a community unified in a common objective. Justice for justice, justice for justice. Describe the scene to me, Mariah requested softly. They filled the entire thoroughfare, David reported. A candlelight vigil, signs bearing Justice's likeness. There's a contingent of veterans in uniform at the forefront. Church groups displaying their banners, families with their children, even some law enforcement officers, retired ones, I believe, standing in solidarity with them. Helen joined them at the window. They are entirely unaware of what awaits them. They presume this is merely another demonstration they can passively endure. Let them harbor that misconception, Mariah stated, her voice firm. While they are fixated on the throngs, our filing will descend like a thunderclap. By the time they comprehend the unfolding events, it will be irrevocably too late to impede them. The chanting persisted, rising and falling with the rhythm of ocean waves against the shore. Mariah stood erect and resolute, absorbing the palpable energy of the assembled populace below. For the first time since Justice's untimely demise, the pervasive darkness felt marginally less oppressive. The path forward was illuminated, charted by legal precedent and federal statutes. Justice for justice. Justice for justice. Tomorrow, Mariah murmured, her fingers lightly tracing the windowpane. Tomorrow, we shall unveil the true meaning of justice. Rosa Martinez burst into Mariah's study without a perfunctory knock, her footsteps betraying an excited urgency. Judge Ellison, you must hear this immediately. Mariah turned from her desk, detecting the palpable urgency in Rosa's vocalizations. What is it? One of our volunteers, who works as a custodian at Donovan's Bar and Grill, Rosa explained, producing her mobile device. You know, that upscale establishment frequented by legal professionals post-court sessions. She managed to record something last evening. David and Helen drew nearer as Rosa initiated playback. Judge Alan Raw's dulcet tones permeated the room, tinged with a discernible slur from expensive whiskey. Do not concern yourself with Mariah's minor crusade, Mark. The matter is under my purview. Raw's distinctive laughter echoed through the recording. She fancies herself rather astute with this federal filing, but I have already leveraged existing connections. We shall inundate it with procedural motions until the entire affair fades into obscurity. Officer Keller's recognizable sneer followed. You had better expedite matters. These protesters exhibit no inclination to disband. Please. I was her mentor, recall? I possess precise insight into her thought processes. By the time she grasps the unfolding reality, the statute of limitations will have expired. Your pension remains secure. Mariah's hands tightened their grip on her desk, her knuckles whitening. The betrayal struck with a more profound intensity, hearing it so unvarnished and direct. The recording extends for approximately 10 minutes, Rosa stated. They engage in even more specific discourse regarding their deliberate obstruction of justice. And there is absolutely no ambiguity. It is unequivocally them. They are clearly identifiable in the security footage from the establishment. Helen's chair scraped backward. This development fundamentally alters the landscape. Conspiracy to obstruct justice, captured on audio. The Bar Association will be compelled to take decisive action. It's not just the bar, David interjected, already on his phone. This is precisely what we required to instigate federal intervention. I'm contacting the Civil Rights Division immediately. Rosa, meanwhile, was already broadcasting the recording online, her fingers a blur on her device. Going live in 3, 2, 1. The impact was instantaneous. Within mere minutes, their devices began to chime with a barrage of notifications, news alerts, text messages, and calls from journalists. CNN is featuring it, Helen announced, glancing at her tablet. MSNBC too. They're replaying the audio relentlessly. Mariah remained perfectly still, absorbing it all. Alan served at the Judicial College alongside me, delivered speeches at conferences on professional ethics, and yet was this utterly dishonest. The distant wail of sirens intensified outside. Patrol cars and media vans converged on the scene, their strobing lights casting an eerie glow even visible to Mariah's limited sight. David terminated his call. The Department of Justice is dispatching a team. They're requesting all our documentation, particularly anything pertaining to the other service animal fatalities. This recording definitively establishes the pattern of concealment we had anticipated. Rosa's device continued its insistent buzzing. Social media is in an uproar. The hashtag Judge Raw is trending. People are circulating snippets of Raw's pronouncements on judicial integrity juxtaposed with the recording. More footsteps echoed in the corridor. Mariah's security detail had arrived. Judge Allison, the senior officer stated, "We must escort you out. The press is overwhelming the premises." "No," Mariah replied with unwavering resolve. "I will not be hidden away. Not at this critical juncture." The subsequent hours dissolved into a whirlwind of activity. The recording was broadcast on every news outlet. Legal scholars meticulously analyzed every utterance. Reporters delved into Raw's prior rulings, uncovering unsettling consistencies. By midnight, the Judicial Council convened an emergency session. By sunrise, they had suspended Raw pending a full inquiry. His attempting to claim the recording was fabricated, Helen reported, reading through the latest updates. However, 3 independent audio specialists have confirmed its authenticity. David returned from a series of conversations, his voice alight with enthusiasm. The DOJ has just declared they are assuming control of the investigation. Full federal oversight is now in effect. They are deploying U.S. Marshals to secure all evidence. Rosa showed them her phone. Observe the courthouse. Citizens have been assembling throughout the entire night. The crowd's chants, amplified by the windows, were louder than ever before. "Judge Allison! Judge Allison!" Mariah stood, adjusting her jacket. "What is the time?" "Nearly 9 o'clock. Helen informed her, "Your hearing is in 30 minutes. Then it is time." Mariah retrieved her cane. "David, is the revised filing prepared?" "Right here," he confirmed, along with the recording and 50 pages of corroborating documentation. The security team escorted them to the ground floor. The instant they opened the main entrance, the cacophony washed over them like a tidal wave. Hundreds of voices erupted in cheers, cameras flashed incessantly, and reporters shouted questions. Rosa took Mariah's arm. "Ready." More than ready. Mariah stepped forward, her head held high. The assembled throng parted, creating a passage. Voices called out their support. "We are with you, Judge. Make them pay. Justice for justice." Reporters thrust their microphones toward her. "Judge Allison, what is your statement regarding Judge Raw's recording? Will you be filing additional charges? How does it feel to be vindicated?" Mariah continued her measured pace, Rosa guiding her through the pandemonium. Her cane tapped a steady rhythm on the pavement, each stride deliberate and assured. The courthouse steps loomed ahead, the very steps she had ascended months prior with justice by her side. Now she climbed them alone, yet not without support. The collective energy of the crowd buoyed her, their voices forming an impenetrable wall of strength at her back. At the summit of the stairs, Mariah paused. The morning sun warmed her face. Below, the crowd fell into a profound silence, awaiting her next move. David leaned in close. "Keller and his attorney have just arrived. They appear utterly terrified." "Good," Mariah stated softly. "They ought to be." The imposing doors of the courthouse swung open before her. Within, justice awaited. Not the perverted version that had long shielded corruption, but genuine justice, the very principle she had dedicated her life to upholding. The crowd's chant followed her inside. "Judge Allison! Judge Allison!" Each step reverberated through the marble hallway, propelling her toward the courtroom where everything would fundamentally change. The federal courtroom buzzed with palpable tension. Every seat was occupied, with overflow crowds watching via monitors in adjoining chambers. Briggs and Keller sat rigidly at the defense table, their faces pale and slick with sweat under the harsh fluorescent lights. Harold Whitaker shuffled towards the witness stand, his former arrogance replaced by nervous tremors. The prosecutor, a sharp-eyed woman from the DOJ's Civil Rights Division, approached, holding a tablet. "Mr. Whitaker, we are about to play your 911 call from that morning. Please listen with great attention. Harold's voice filled the courtroom, laced with barely suppressed animosity. There's this black woman who can't control her dog. These people shouldn't be here. Children are not safe. Someone needs to take action. The prosecutor paused the recording. Mr. Whitaker, you testified earlier that Justice, Judge Ellison's service dog, was lunging at children. Were there any children present that morning? Harold shifted uncomfortably. Well, there could have been. Yes or no, Mr. Whitaker? No, he mumbled. In fact, security footage from your own residence shows the sidewalk was entirely vacant except for Judge Ellison and Justice. Does it not? Harold's face contorted. You don't comprehend. These people. The prosecutor's tone grew sharper. Kindly elucidate for the jury precisely whom you are referring to as these people. The courtroom held its breath. Harold glanced at his attorney, who stared at the table, comprehending that any interjection would only exacerbate the situation. I merely meant, Your Honor, permission to treat the witness as hostile. Granted. What followed was a meticulous dismantling of Harold's credibility. The prosecutor presented years of his social media posts, neighborhood complaints, and recorded conversations, revealing a consistent pattern of discriminatory behavior. Officer Ramirez then took the stand, his posture erect, his voice clear. The baseless accusations against him had been dropped that very morning. Officer Ramirez, please recount what you observed on Officer Briggs's unedited body camera footage. Justice was composed, adhering to all directives. He moved in front of Judge Ellison protectively, but never aggressively. Officer Briggs fired without provocation. And following the shooting, Officer Keller laughed. He stated, and I quote, "One less problem in the neighborhood." Keller's counsel lodged an objection, but the damage was already inflicted. The jurors' expressions conveyed their profound disgust. The evidence continued to accumulate hour after hour. Internal affairs documents exposed systematic cover-ups. Text messages revealed Keller coordinating with Judge Raw to impede justice. Financial records unearthed the police union's slush fund, established to settle misconduct claims. When the verdict was rendered 3 days later, it was unanimous. Briggs and Keller, found guilty on all charges. Civil rights violations, conspiracy, obstruction of justice. The judge's voice resonated. Officer Briggs, Officer Keller, please stand. They rose, their shoulders slumped. This court sentences each of you to 15 years in federal prison. Your pensions are forfeited. You will never again be employed in law enforcement. The assembled gallery erupted in cheers. The judge continued, his words cutting through the din. Furthermore, this court determines that the police union operated as a criminal enterprise under RICO statutes. All assets are hereby frozen pending further investigation. Harold Whitaker was not present in court to hear his sentence. He had absconded from the city the previous evening, but it made no difference. Civil rights organizations had already initiated a dozen lawsuits. His face was plastered across national media as the emblem of racist vigilantism. Outside the courthouse, the crowd swelled into the thousands. Signs waved. Justice prevails. And thank you, Judge Ellison. Mariah emerged with her legal team. The sun warmed her face as tears streamed down her cheeks. Rosa squeezed her arm. They are all here for you, Rosa whispered. Every person you inspired to resist corruption. The chants grew louder. Justice, justice, justice. Each chant struck Mariah's heart like a powerful wave. She thought of her loyal companion, gone, but never forgotten. The system had attempted to break her, to silence her, to make her question herself. Instead, she had shattered the system's grip on power. David touched her shoulder. The DOJ is announcing a nationwide review of service animal shootings. They are calling it the Justice Initiative. Helen added, the State Bar has just disbarred Raw. Every case he adjudicated is now under review. The crowd's energy enveloped Mariah like a comforting embrace. For the first time since that dreadful morning, she felt something beyond sorrow, beyond indignation, beyond unwavering resolve. She felt justice. True justice. The kind that transforms institutions, rather than merely penalizing individuals. The kind that honors the sacrifice of a devoted companion. Weeks passed like gentle waves, smoothing away the sharpest edges of her grief. Mariah stood in the training center's sun-drenched courtyard, her heart quickening as soft paws padded across the concrete. The trainer, Sarah, guided a young German shepherd towards her. Judge Ellison, please meet Honor. He is 2 years old and successfully completed his advanced service training last week. Mariah knelt, extending her hand. Honor's moist nose touched her palm, followed by a tender lick. His fur felt like silk beneath her fingers as she traced the contours of his head, his ears, his powerful shoulders. He's magnificent, Sarah said softly. Black and tan, just like Justice was, but he possesses his own distinct personality, gentle, intuitive, and remarkably focused. Tears welled in Mariah's eyes as Honor pressed closer, as if sensing her emotions. The dog's warmth against her leg felt both familiar and new, akin to returning to a home that had been meticulously rebuilt. Honor, Mariah whispered, testing the name on her tongue. The dog's tail wagged, thumping against her side. Sarah guided them through their initial training session together. Honor responded to commands with precise attention, moving in perfect synchronicity with Mariah's gestures. When they practiced street crossing, his body positioned itself exactly where Justice had always stood. Mariah felt a piece of her heart inexplicably realign. That same afternoon, her phone buzzed with news that caused her to grip Honor's harness tighter. Congress had enacted the Justice Act. The legislation, named in honor of her fallen companion, established stringent federal oversight for all cases involving service animals. It also instituted new protections for disabled individuals confronting discrimination or police misconduct. The vote was overwhelmingly in favor. David informed her over the phone, "Your story has swayed opinions." Even politicians who typically obstruct reform could not disregard this. The following morning, Mariah prepared to return to court for the first time since the trial. Honor's harness jingled as she fastened it, the sound both different and precisely right. She adjusted her judge's robe, feeling its familiar weight settle upon her shoulders. Outside the courthouse, a crowd had gathered. Not protesters this time, but supporters. Their cheers surged up the steps like thunder as Mariah emerged from her vehicle. Honor stood steady beside her, alert yet calm. "Judge Ellison. Judge Ellison." She recognized Rose's voice within the throng, then Helen's, and subsequently others, neighbors, activists, fellow judges who had stood in solidarity with her. Their collective support enveloped her like a protective shield. The initial step felt profoundly significant. Honor moved with flawless precision, matching her stride. Another step, then another. The marble stairs, which had once seemed an insurmountable mountain, now rose before her as a path to victory. Reporters called out questions. "Judge Ellison, how does it feel to return? What message do you have for other victims of police misconduct? Will the Justice Act prevent future tragedies?" She continued her walk, Honor's harness held firmly in her grasp. The dog navigated her past the press with gentle guidance, just as Justice had done countless times before. Midway up, a young girl's voice pierced through the din. "Thank you for not giving up." Mariah turned slightly, offering a smile in that direction. More voices joined in. "Welcome back, Your Honor. Justice lives on. You showed them they cannot break us." The courthouse doors awaited above, their familiar presence drawing her forward. Honor's steps remained steady, his training impeccable. Yet, there was something more. A burgeoning connection with each shared moment, each synchronized movement. At the top of the stairs, Mariah paused. The morning sun warmed her face as the crowd's energy swelled around her. Honor stood perfectly still, awaiting her signal. She reached down, running her fingers through his fur, sensing the strength and loyalty emanating from his presence. "Justice lives on in you," she whispered. Her words intended only for Honor's ears. The dog pressed closer, as if making a silent promise of his own. Together they faced the courthouse doors, not as a replacement for what was lost, but as something entirely new, born from the ashes of injustice. Honor's harness felt steady in her hand as they took the final steps forward. "I trust you found that narrative engaging. Kindly share it with your acquaintances and subscribe to ensure you do not miss subsequent installments. In the interim, I have personally selected 2 stories that I believe will captivate your interest. Have a most excellent day."